Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the new episode of Build on Serverless. Here we have James in Seattle. And today we're going to be talking about a tweet like a pro. So, James, do you want to give us more details about what we're going to do today?
Yeah, so today we're going to do a number of things, but the number one thing we're going to do is we're going to build a serverless application in Java. And it's going to actually use another serverless application that exists in the serverless application repository, the AWS serverless application repository. So I wanted to make a fun project, so we're going to do some analysis of tweets, and we're going to use a service that I haven't used yet, so this will be exciting.
That's good.
It'll either really exciting.
What could possibly go wrong, right? We're trying something new.
We're going to use Amazon Comprehend, which gives an API that allows you to do sentiment analysis on tweets. So whether, on any text, on whether it's positive or negative or neutral. And so we're going to build a serverless application that does sentiment analysis of tweets.
That's perfect. And do you want to quick introduce yourself? Because I forgot. Totally my bad.
Yeah, no problem. My name is James Hood. I'm a senior software developer here at Amazon, and I've actually been with the company coming up on 9 years in August, so I've been here a while, and worked in both retail side and AWS. And last summer, I came back to AWS to be the tech lead for the AWS Serverless Application Repository, and definitely really excited about. I was excited about serverless before I came to AWS, and continue to get more and more excited as we progress the technology and just see what it's capable of.
Mm-hmm. Oh, pretty awesome. Okay, so it seems like we're going to use a bunch of services today, and we're going to build a serverless application, right?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, and which language are we going to use? Is that
so we're going to use Java today.
Okay.
Yep. We're going to use Java today. The nice thing about serverless applications is that you can really use any language that's supported by AWS Lambda. So Python, Go, .NET, Java as well. Today we're going to use Java. I think there are a lot of Java developers out there who might be curious how you would structure a Java serverless application, and do you use Maven? How do you do it? So we're hoping to answer a lot of those questions today.
That's perfect. I actually get that question quite a lot. People usually get confused about, should I use a single function for everything? Should I separate it in multiple functions? How do I structure my code? Should I use Spring Boot or other frameworks? That's perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's definitely talk about all that, answer as many questions as I can. I've definitely developed a number of serverless applications in Java as well as other languages. So hopefully I can help compare and contrast as well.
Sure. Okay, perfect. So I guess that's what we need, unless we have any questions or anyone new to all of this. Hopefully not, and then we're going to be on the chat as well, helping out. So yeah, let's crack on. Let's get going.
Okay, great. So I wanted to start by talking about what the AWS Serverless Application Repository is. But first, let's even take a step back and talk about what is a serverless application, right? So just to make sure everyone's on the same page and level set, when we talk about serverless, we're talking about a family of technologies that allows you to build a full application without needing to manage servers. Of course, there are servers in the background, but the nice thing is AWS takes care of all of those details, including things like making sure hosts are patched and up to date, making sure that you have enough hosts so that you can scale if your traffic spikes. So a lot of these operational details that have been on the engineers to take care of and configure in the past, serverless allows you to. The concept of serverless is that host management is completely abstracted away from you as much as possible, and you're able to just focus on code. But it's more than just AWS Lambda. It's any service that AWS provides that has this feature. So even services that have been around a really long time, like DynamoDB, S3, you don't spin up hosts and manage hosts to put an object into S3. So that's considered a serverless component that can be used in a serverless application. So So a serverless application is really a family of these resources plus your Lambda function code that you put together into a full application to solve some problem.
Right. If people are interested in knowing more about those building blocks that James just mentioned, if you go to the page aws.amazon.com/serverless, you will find a bunch of resources, including customer case studies and some GitHub code, so you can have a look at those.
Right. And so the AWS Serverless Application Repository is a relatively new offering. It was announced in preview at reInvent last year in November, and then it became generally available to use last February. And what the AWS Serverless Application Repository allows, publishers can publish serverless applications to it, and then consumers, anyone with an AWS account can quickly discover, deploy them to their account, and use them to solve their problems or be a piece of a larger application.
No, that's perfect. So if I take that right, I would be able to publish some applications that in my company I could use, my coworkers or friends, and I could somewhat compose those applications and also learn. I could actually install an application, look up for the source code when someone published that, and even learn how people organize their code, where it's one of the most common questions we get these days.
Right, exactly. It's a wonderful tool, not just for using in production, but also for learning. So we do offer private publishing of applications. You can publish an application that's available either just to your AWS account, or you can set policies on it to make it available to other AWS accounts specifically, and that's private sharing. But then there's also a mode where you can make an application public, and that means that it's available on a public search experience, which is actually right here. I'll make that a little bigger. So it's available on a public search experience, and it can be deployed by anyone with an AWS account. So, and the nice thing with the public applications is we require those applications to have a open source license associated with them. So the source code is all online. You can go to GitHub or Bitbucket and wherever their source code is stored and see and understand the application and what it does. So again, like you said, great place to understand applications.
That's interesting. One thing I actually haven't noticed myself, and now I'm noticing in the big screen, each of those applications have a number of deployments, and you could see how many times someone actually tried that out, and also the tags.
Absolutely, nice. Absolutely. And this number of deployments actually only on the public side, it actually just reflects what's been deployed in a single region in US East 1 right now. So there are also other deployments in other regions as well. But yeah, you can see deployment counts and you have a search experience. So since we're talking about Twitter today, I'm just going to search on Twitter. And actually this app is the one that we're going to use today. So you can see when you look at an application, you get a link to wherever the source code is. You can see if it's GitHub, you can see how many stars are on it. You have an option to deploy it to your account, and we'll talk about that later. But you can see the README for this, and we'll talk through this particular app in a little more detail. You can also see license information. This one's MIT licensed and available from AWS. AWS Labs.
That's pretty cool. So I can even see the source code before I deploy that application in my account as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do click on deploy, you're taken to the AWS console, and you are given a link to the source code URL. In this case, it's actually the GitHub tag, the specific GitHub tag of the exact source code of the version that you're deploying. So you can look into it and see exactly what you're going to be deploying to your system. You can also see permissions. So it'll tell you what permissions this application will have. So it'll be able to invoke a Lambda. It will also be able to do some operations on a DynamoDB table. So CRUD is just the create, read, update, delete. And it also has a read policy. There's a KMS decryption policy, so it'll be able to decrypt. And we'll talk about why it's doing that. You can also see with serverless applications, we use a tool called SAM, the Serverless Application Model, and there's a SAM template associated with it, and you can actually view the SAM template right here, and if you want a deeper understanding of exactly how this app is laid out and what it does.
That's really cool. Okay. And those, I just noticed something. There's actually a parameters in there, which I presume serverless application repo we will use by the time we make those deployments, right?
Yeah, so deploying an application, what does that mean? So that actually means that we're creating a CloudFormation change set for this application into your account on your behalf. So if I scroll down, again, you'll see the README right there so that you can reference it, but you have to give your application a name, and this corresponds to the name of the stack that gets created by CloudFormation. So you give it a name, and then there are various parameters that are part of the app. And this is app specific. So these are values that are in this template. This description is in the template. So it's just being rendered here. Mm-hmm. And this particular app actually has a very large number of parameters. And there are a lot of things that you need to fill in for interacting with the Twitter API. And again, we'll go into a little bit more detail about that when we get to it. Yeah. Any more questions on the repo?
Yeah, I think I'm good to go. I was just looking at the chat. There was one question about the poller, if we can reduce that to 30 seconds. But I believe that's more of you're using CloudWatch events from what I can see it. And that's on a per minute basis.
Yes, if you look at CloudWatch event, or if you look at this diagram, this actually explains the app. I'm going to go back to this page so we can just see it here. So this is a picture of the Twitter event source app. So what is this app? This app allows you to process tweets from a Twitter search. So you can do a search against Twitter, and then you actually put the search terms in as a parameter to this app. And what will happen is it will then start invoking your whatever Lambda function you tell it with whatever tweets are returned from that search. Gotcha. And so the Twitter search API, their standard search API, is a polled API. It's just you call it to perform a search. So this uses CloudWatch events. It creates a CloudWatch events rule on a schedule to trigger the Lambda function. Now, the question about can we go more frequent than 1 minute? And actually, the answer is no right now, because CloudWatch events, they support minutes. Minutes is the smallest granularity they support, and I believe it has to be an integer value. I haven't actually tried 0.5 minutes, but yeah, so 1 minute was the most frequent I was able to get it. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I would actually take that from the person who asked on the chat. Take that on board as a feature request to the product team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
All right. So yeah. So what I want to do today is this is an idea I'm actually really excited about, and something I've been kind of evangelizing just on my own team internally, and then we've done a couple other Twitch live streams. Because when you hear serverless app, you may think, well, does that have to be a complete application that does one thing? And the neat thing about apps like this are they can be composed into a larger application. So this application takes care of one thing. It handles the details of interacting with the Twitter search API, but it delegates out to whatever Lambda function you give it to actually process the tweets that are returned. So it doesn't know what you're doing with the tweets. This app doesn't care. But now it's just that much less code for you to build, right? You don't have to learn the Twitter search API. You don't have to code against it. You can just deploy this application, and then you write a Lambda function that just takes an array of tweets. And that is really powerful.
Absolutely. And it is great to see that moving into that direction, because we can move closer to composable applications, as we chat about a few other times as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's one of the things I'm personally most excited about with serverless right now is this potential, especially with the serverless application repository, of now publishing a number of building blocks, these generic building blocks that you can pull into your application. I think serverless, the technology, really greatly simplified the operational burden, like it reduces the operational burden for teams. And I believe that serverless apps further reduces the development burden on teams. So very excited about this.
Absolutely. I agree.
Great. All right. Should we get to some coding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are already starting to ask, show me the ID, show me your terminal. Right. I want to see some customizations. And that actually, funny enough, that's actually one of the questions we got the most since we started this build on serverless. What is it that you're doing in your terminal? What is this your extension for your IDE or something like this? So you can definitely expect some of those questions as well.
Yeah, well, I think you may be surprised that my IDE is pretty standard. So I'm using IntelliJ here for Java, and I have a pretty standard Maven setup. So I right before this live stream, and this is my first live coding on Twitch. So I love this. It's pretty fun because it's almost like live demo on steroids, right? Like live demos are really scary, but this is like watching me code the live demo. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I really wanted to try to stick with the spirit of it. So I didn't like write this app beforehand and try to get the practice on it. Like I really haven't done anything with it. So right before this, 15 minutes ago, I just used IntelliJ to set up a new Maven project. And this one's called AWS Serverless Tweet Sentiment Metrics. All right. And it's empty. There's no source code in it right now. I do have some basics. So I'm going to show you my POM XML. Maven creates the skeleton for you. But I put in my group ID. I put in my artifact ID is just the name of my project. My version, I'm using semantic versioning. So that's another thing. The Serverless Application Repository uses semantic versioning to version your applications. So I'm using semantic versioning. And then if I scroll down, so there's a couple special plugins that I use when I do Lambda-based applications. So let's talk about those. So the big one is the Shade plugin, the Maven Shade plugin. So so when you normally in a Java library, Maven would just compile your code only into a single jar. Now with AWS Lambda, your jar may have many dependencies, right? And with AWS Lambda, when you create your Lambda function, you need to package up all those dependencies as well. One way to do it is to grab all of the jars and zip them all up into a zip file, and then you can put that into Lambda. Now, that can have a little bit of a performance penalty because jars themselves are also zip archives. So if you think of trying to unpack that, you unzip the zip, and then you have to unzip all of those jars. So what the Shade plugin allows you to do is it'll actually grab all the dependent jars, it'll unzip them all, and then just put all the class files in one big flat directory structure, and then turn those into like an Uber jar, into a single jar for your application. And let me see if I can show this here.
In the meantime, for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, in the meantime, James actually brings this up. The page I just posted on the chat actually has a bunch of best practices, including how you organize the classes and some other stuff as well to speed up the performance as well in that scenario.
Yeah, and so what you can see is that in the target directory, and that's just a Maven thing, Maven puts things in the built artifacts in the target directory, there are two jars. There's a original dash and then my jar, and then there's the actual jar that you would normally see in Maven. And if I look, so if you look, the original jar is very small because it contained my source code, which right now is nothing. and then the actual jar is much larger, and that's because it actually contains any dependencies that I've put in my Maven runtime dependencies. So that's all included, and this jar is now ready to be uploaded to Lambda because all your dependencies are there. And there are, I think you linked the doc with, there's best practices. There are walkthroughs in our documentation on using the Maven Shade plugin. So that's the Shade plugin. What else do I have here? I have some Log4j stuff. Let's see.
I see that you're using Dagger in there. Am I reading that right?
Yes, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about making a serverless application at scale. So if you're playing around with Lambda, there's a request handler that's like your entry point for the Lambda. It's a object. In Java, you have a request handler object, and it has a function, and that's your entry point for your Lambda. In other languages, in Python, you just define a function somewhere, and that's your entry point for Lambda. So Lambda has an entry point somewhere. If you're just starting out, you can write all of your code in that one class. But if you're writing if you're writing a non-trivial application, you're not going to want to put all of your business logic into that one class. So then you need to start getting more advanced. So dependency injection is a really common pattern in Java programming, and a lot of the frameworks that are used for that. So common ones are Spring, Juice, and Dagger is another dependency injection framework. Dagger is the one that I recommend using for Lambda, and the reason for that is that Spring generally brings a lot of dependencies in with it, and the larger that jar and the larger the zip that you send up to Lambda, it actually impacts how long it takes on the first run of a Lambda function, which is called a cold start. So you really want to try to minimize your dependencies as much as possible. And Spring generally it is componentized, but it brings a lot of dependencies in with it. Juice is much lighter weight, but it uses reflection quite heavily, and so that can incur a penalty at runtime. So Dagger still follows the JSR and uses a lot of the javax.inject annotations, but what it does is it generates a lot of code at build time, so that when you're doing that first run, it's just executing auto-generated code that's just newing up objects. So it still gives you all the dependency injection, but it's doing it at build time. It's doing the heavy lifting at build time, so the runtime is very fast. So I do recommend using Dagger. Jacoco is our coverage tool, and I'm just telling it to exclude a lot of the Dagger and then my core Lambda request handler, and you'll see why. So my pattern is I use Dagger for dependency injection, and then my Lambda request handler is very thin. It just pulls whatever object it needs out of the dependency injection system, and then when the Lambda function's invoked, it just makes one call to actually process the logic.
I think the lesson learned from here is, and I thank you for actually saying that, is when I see customers using Spring in general, they're often coming from EC2, from Docker, or other places where they're used to actually launch an EC2 instance and wait. So that penalty of that startup time is actually, compared from Spring with Dagger, is actually very significant. And more important to what you just said is Lambda function should do only one thing, and one thing really well, and as fast as possibly can. If you try to do everything you can possibly think about in a single Lambda function, that could definitely hurt many principles, single responsibility models, and many others in general. And it's great that you mentioned Dagger once again, because that's also in the best practices page.
Oh, great. Good. I'm glad to know I'm following best practices. I've actually, and you know, feel free to ask me questions. I use serverless in production. So I have built many serverless apps that are used in real production scenarios. So I definitely am passionate about the topic. I have a lot to say on it. And we use Dagger. We use and very thin request handlers. It helps with testability, as you'll see. Let's see what else we have here. So I'm probably not going to get a chance to write integration tests today, but in my serverless apps, I write unit tests, I write integration tests. So I use a plugin that actually does a little bit of pre-integration test setup, and that essentially runs a script that deploys my application to an AWS account, and then it runs my integration test files using Maven's standard integration test runner, and then the post-integration test step is tearing down those test stacks that were created. If people are interested, maybe we can go through this in a different Twitch broadcast.
Yeah, definitely. Just before I go, just to make it clear for people who are watching, when you say integration test on the way you are used to set up now that you are running in production, the integration test, you are setting up a whole new stack just to test the real service that you're using, right? You're not trying to mock every single one of services.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So and there are many levels of testing, and I don't like getting into the naming battle of, is that an integration test or an acceptance test or all these system tests. And I like to think about it in terms of mocking, because every layer of testing, you're mocking somewhere. I think unit tests, that's where you have the highest level of agreement on where we're mocking. You're generally trying to just test the class individually, and not a lot of dependencies on it, mocking out the dependencies. For this integration test, what I mean is that I actually deploy the application as a CloudFormation stack. I may deploy a test stack that has additional resources. So for Twitter as an event source, for example, that app needs some Lambda function that it can invoke to try to do something, right? And so your test stack may set up some of those other functions, but they're actually deployed in an AWS account, and then the integration test can query CloudFormation, grab the actual Lambda function name, and then really invoke them. Or in the case of the Twitter as an event source application, it's automatically invoked by the CloudWatch events trigger. So you're more just looking for the effect of whatever your Lambda is that receives the tweets. So that's what I mean when I say integration test. It's really deploying to Lambda. It's really using DynamoDB if your app uses that. And you're trying to make calls to AWS to verify various things.
Perfect. Okay, that's fantastic. I will actually leave another link to the channel if you're interested in more of those details about what happens in production, how do you separate those tags, and pretty much everything else that you might want to ask yourself when you are running in prod. But definitely we could cover in another episode of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, for dependencies, I don't think this is covered in the best practice doc. I personally really enjoy using Project Lombok. It saves me a lot of boilerplate, so I'll have that in here. I'll try to explain a couple of those the first time I use it, in case you're not familiar with it. It really just saves a lot of the kind of Java boilerplate code, like getters and setters and equals and hash code methods, and it just auto-generates them at build time. But you can see I'm using Dagger as the compiler. I'm using SLF4j, which is a logging interface package, very common in Java. It abstracts you from the exact logging framework that you're using. So this AWS Lambda Java Core and AWS Lambda Java Events gives you objects that are the structure of the events that Lambda sends you. Actually, we may not even use these, but they're kind of part of my boilerplate. It's a serverless app. I'd throw them in here. Cool. I usually end up using some niceties from Google Guava, which we'll see if we use that. What I haven't added here are actually the AWS SDK, so I will be adding that as we need it. And then at runtime, my actual logging implementation is Log4j, and I'm using Log4j2 here, and there's actually a Lambda Java Log4j2 that makes it so that using standard SLF4j results in the right thing happening in Lambda, and you get your logs in CloudWatch logs.
That's cool. All right.
I didn't know that one. Yeah, for unit testing, I use JUnit. I use Mockito for mocking. I like using Hamcrest as opposed to the standard JUnit asserts. And I'll show a quick example of that. I'm probably not going to do exhaustive unit tests during this
fine.
live stream, but I will show what I would normally do. Cool. So that covers dependencies. All right, we're ready to start. So, okay, so tweet sentiment, what does that mean? So I can go to Twitter and, let's see.
Oh.
Let me, no.
Uh-oh.
All right, I'm gonna have to log in here. So I can go to Twitter and I can search, give me just a second here. Basically on Twitter, I can search for, let me see if it'll let me just not, let's see.
Yeah, I was just looking at, you should be able to search doing twitter.com/search.
Okay.
And then just use a query string queue.
All right, that works. So what I'm hoping to do is to maybe do hashtag serverless. So here are search results that have the hashtag serverless in them, right? And there's text in this search. So what I'm hoping to do today is Amazon Comprehend is this pretty neat service where you can put in free-form text and it can do various pieces of analysis. So it tries to extract meaning from your text, and it can try to extract things like locations or organizations. But the other big thing it can do is sentiment analysis. So it can try to come up with a neutral score, a positive, a negative score. So what I want to do is I want to create a Lambda function that receives tweets. So I will configure the Twitter event source app with a search, with some search, like hashtag serverless. Yep. And then that's going to start invoking my Lambda function with a list of tweets. And then I want to send the text of those tweets to Amazon Comprehend. And I want to pull the sentiment scores out. And then I want to publish those to CloudWatch metrics. And that way I can get a graph and kind of get a feel for what maybe, let's say, the average or what kind of sentiment that we're seeing for that particular search. So that's my hope. That's what I want to do today.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
All right. Okay. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So this is a great way to test it out. So I can grab a tweet. Let's try to look at this one and see what, or let's see.
I think that one. What I found interesting is you can actually even test through the console. So you don't even need to make an API call to Comprehend, just to get a feeling of how the results are going to look like. And there's even an emoji in there. Interesting to see how it's going to render that.
Let's see how it does. So the sentiment on this was mostly neutral. It actually thinks a little bit negative, which is funny because it says went full serverless on a new side project related to stock options trading on AWS. Let's see if I ever get to the point where I will miss an actual server instance. So it's actually pretty positive when you look at it, but you know, language is difficult. It did detect that this was English, so the emoji didn't throw it off. But it's just fun. It's a fun service. Let's see.
Yeah, that's the famous Chris. Let's see all the emojis and see if that.
Let's see. Let's analyze this. The neutrality is actually pretty low. It's saying that it's mostly positive, so it has a 0.3 on positive. I believe the way that this score works is that a 1.0 is 100%. I think 1.0 is like maximum confidence on how this works. So yeah.
It kind of makes sense because if you look at the language, confidence is actually 0.99. So it's definitely we definitely can check the docs, but it looks like you're right.
Yeah. This is a confidence percentage. Yep. So today I asked people for feedback on the AWS Lambda roadmap, and a good bunch of replies was people helping other people solve their problems. Hell yeah. All right. Serverless community. All right. So it looks like that's definitely very positive, and Comprehend was able to detect that there were positive sentiments in that text. So cool. So this is a neat API. I'm excited to use it for the first time here. So let's see how it goes. All right. So now what I keep switching away from is I actually have another app that I built that interacts with the Twitter event source. It's called Retweet Leaderboard. I used it on my last Twitch live stream. And I have it pulled up because that's my safety net. If I don't know if I find something where, how do I usually set that up? I'm probably going to flip over to it and copy something over from it. But I'll try to explain that as I do it. Okay, so let's talk about how we structure our Java packages. So IntelliJ Setup, the standard Maven setup. So everything's under main everything's under source, and you have main and test. So main is where your actual functional logic is, and then test is any of your test code. I also set up a basic git ignore just for any kind of Java. And then my POM XML was created. I just showed you that. And then I have a sam.yaml, so we should talk about that. But that is my SAM template for this application, which right now, so this is a SAM template is actually a AWS CloudFormation transform that's applied over CloudFormation. So this is the template version, CloudFormation template version, and then to use SAM, you add this transform saying AWS serverless. From there, it's fairly standard CloudFormation. However, SAM adds a lot of really nice extra features that are very friendly for serverless applications. So I have one resource in this app right now. It's just a single function. AWS serverless function is not a resource type that's supported by native CloudFormation. It's actually something that's defined by SAM, and it gives you a more compact syntax for defining a function, what events trigger it, things like that. For this particular application, it's just a standalone, this is more boilerplate that I had left over. It's just a standalone function. And what I have right now is that the runtime is Java 8. We haven't written a handler for it yet, so I don't have that. We don't have code for it, but actually I can populate that now. So where is the code? Well, I showed you it's in target / and then it's this jar. So I can put target / in that jar. And this is a local reference, but as we'll see later, SAM provides some tools that will convert this into an object in S3 for me.
Right. If you're actually watching this now and you're new to SAM, etc., the previous episode we actually touched on SAM and how we open sourced the SAM engine behind the scenes. We actually, basically, SAM is a superset of CloudFormation that will make it easier for you to build and define your serverless application in a much nicer and compact way. When you look at that serverless function, that will likely trigger and create multiple resources. And more importantly, as James just said, on the code URI, instead of actually passing a S3 URL, you actually pass the relative path, which we can package it up for you, and we can use that for deployment. So I sent the link on chat, which has a recording from the previous episode, and there's definitely more to come on that end.
Great. Yep. So I don't know so you can set, this is the code, the runtime is Java 8. My handler will come back and fill that in later. Tracing, this is to support X-ray tracing, and I hope to show some of that later as well.
Sure.
Our memory size, you have to specify a memory size for your Lambda function. I'm just starting with 512 megabytes of memory. Yeah. And then timeout, so you can go up to 5 minutes. This is in seconds. I'm just saying 1 minute for now. Policies, we'll talk about permissions once we actually need them. We will need to define some permissions to talk to comprehend, for example. And then environment variables, they allow you to set environment variables that you can look at, that you can pull inside your Lambda function. And I don't know if we're going to need any today, but I'll still show where I usually put them. and how I usually handle that in a Java application. So this is our SAM template so far. Let's get to some actual code. So let's see, we'll say, I don't know what we want to call this, sentiment analyzer, something like that. And what does this do? This will process tweets and get a score from comprehend and publish them, and publish sentiment scores to CloudWatch metrics. It's Java. That's if you follow a single responsibility principle, you'll see that I said a bunch of different things that it's going to do. So I'll probably create some helper objects and things to do it. But let's start there. So this is going to take some kind of let's say this will process tweets. And then what is this going to take? Is this going to take some list of strings? I really don't know. So I could process the tweets as strings. We'll probably want to do a little better than that. I'll probably look at what I did for Retweet Leaderboard to see. So this is our sentiment analyzer. We are going to have to talk to comprehend, or somebody's going to have to talk to comprehend. So, but let's say this is essentially our entry point. This is going to process the tweets. So is Lambda going to call this directly? Well, in Java, no. So in Java, this is my regular business logic. So the way I like to structure things, you can see I have a package prefix that's just serverless, and then I'm calling this tweet sentiment. Okay, maybe I'll rename this. I'll call this tweet processor. Okay, and then I can just call it process. Love those IDE refactors. Cool.
Yeah,
so now let's talk about where Lambda is going to come in. So what I usually do is I create a package. I create two packages. One of them is called Lambda, and that's where my Lambda handlers are going to live. And then another one is called Dagger, and that's where my Dagger dependency injection will go. So for Lambda, I will create a tweet processor handler. Okay, and then this will be entry point for the tweet processor Lambda.
Right.
So in order to do this, there's a helper interface that's provided by that Java core, and it's called request handler. So you get to specify some input. In this case, I'll say it's a list of tweets that are going to come in, and then some output. In this case, I don't need to return anything back. This is a processor that's going to be async invoked, and it's going to do something as a side effect and not need to return anything back. So we need to implement some methods. So this interface defines a method called handle request. So there's going to be our request handler. So at this point, we need to call our tweet processor, right? So where do we get it? Well, we can get it from in our this object. What happens is when Lambda cold starts, when the Lambda function first cold starts, this object gets initialized. So we actually need to put our tweet processor in this function, and we need to, I made it final, which means it has to be initialized in the constructor. So how do I get it, right? Something. So how do I get it? Well, I'm going to get it from Dagger. So Dagger is where I can do all of my setup. So In Dagger, the way Dagger works is you define an interface. Oops. You define an interface that returns the things that you need. So we need this tweet processor. Right, so we have some method that returns our tweet processor. So in our handler, we're actually going to have this component. So I don't know where I'm going to get it, but once I do have it, then I can call, and I'll just do this for now so that IntelliJ is happy. So once I do that, then, okay, I can pull it from this component. Great. So now once I'm in my function, then I can call my tweet processor dot process tweets, and right now these are tweets. Okay, so boom, there we are. We're done. Yeah, just kidding.
So,
Okay.
so James, let's actually pause there very quickly just to explain why we're doing, because there's some people joining right now, so I'm just trying to kind of cover everybody up in the same pace.
Sure.
The reason we actually did that outside the handler, the private final and everything, and you mentioned about cold starts. If you are actually getting here right now and you're still a bit confused on why we're doing all of this, is basically when Lambda receives the first request, imagine we're trying to search those tweets for the first time. Lambda will execute the entire code for you. The second time he executes, what happens there is that if we have a execution environment running, or let's say container running, we may not need to run the entire code. We're only going to execute the handle request.
Yep. Yeah. So on your cold start initialization, this will execute once, and then you'll have this object which can be reused between if the Lambda container itself is reused, then this object won't be reinitialized. It'll just enter this function, this handle request function, when your Lambda is invoked. Okay.
Pretty cool.
All right, but we still have a problem, right? So component has not been initialized. So how do we do that? So in Dagger, actually, this is not a valid component yet because I have to use Dagger's component annotation to tell it that it is a valid component. So I tell it it's a Dagger component, and it asks me for modules. What modules are associated with this Dagger component? Well, I need to write one. I don't have one yet. So let's create one.
And by the way, no pressure. Chris Munz is now watching us, and he is. So.
All right. So we're going to have our app. So this is our DI module that's going to populate our objects. This is where we actually do our initialization of objects for our dependency injection. If you've used Juice, this is going to look very similar to you. If you've used Spring with Java config, not the XML-based config, it's going to look pretty familiar to you. I picked up Dagger really, really fast, and it's not because I'm special. I'd done Java config in Spring. I had done a little bit of Juice, like a little bit, and I picked up Dagger really quickly. It's actually it's a very simple app to use, but I am probably going to cheat because let me see if I can remember all of these things. So what do I need? I need a tweet processor handler, right? That's the thing that I actually need. Oh, sorry. No, I need my tweet processor. That's the actual file I need. So I need something that returns a tweet processor. So, or provide tweet processor, and I will return a new tweet processor. Very exciting. So this is a singleton object. One thing with Juice and with Dagger is that, so Spring, everything defaults to singleton scope. And what singleton means is that this same object, it won't be recreated over and over again. It'll be created once and reused across any threads. Now, with this, now Juice and Dagger went the other way, and their default is that everything is a new object per thread or per anyone using it. So you have to explicitly say this is a singleton. I think there's something like provides. Yeah. So I believe this is all I have to do. If this doesn't work, then I'll cheat and look at my retweet leaderboard.
I don't think a person will ever remember all of this by heart.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we're not.
Yeah, I've done this a bunch of times too, which is probably the only reason I even remember these off the top of my head. Okay, so here now we can map this app module class to our app component, and what it's going to do is now Dagger at build time will generate a bunch of classes and it'll generate a class that implements this interface.
Right.
And that class they follow this very specific naming convention. So they prefix things with Dagger. So there's going to be, I promise, there's going to be a class that's generated at build time that's called Dagger app component. And it'll have a static initializer method called create. And now I will magically have basically my app component interface, and it will give me this object that was created here. And even though it looks like if I call this once, or if I keep calling this, it'll keep giving me new objects, Dagger puts all the magic wrappers around everything. Because I said this is a singleton, it's only going to execute this code once. And then it'll save that object. And if I ever pull a component that's tied to that module that's pulling out this object, the same object's going to come out every time. So that's just the dependency injection magic and how that works. So this is the core structure of how I like to do Java Lambda functions. Mm-hmm. This may seem like a lot of overhead when your business logic looks like this, but when your business logic is many, many, many classes and objects and different dependencies, this becomes critical. You really can't, and you will frequently have many Lambda functions that might point to the same module of business logic, and you don't want to, of course, you're not going to duplicate those in every handler. It's just it's a very clean structure for your Lambdas.
I think reflecting on that point, not really only Java, but because I mostly use Python for almost everything, or Python and Node.js, is I try to follow a similar approach, because similar to what you said previously, it actually facilitates testing a lot, and also facilitates where Lambda in this case is just going to be your compute environment, where all you receive is an event and a context, right? You can have as a POJO there, but essentially all your business logic should live somewhere else. So your Lambda just becomes yet another Java file in there, or Java class, and that's it. If you actually need to do some profiling or some testing, well, the tools you normally use are exactly the same.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. Okay, so now let's actually write our business logic. So this is the core structure. This is how I structure things. For serverless apps, what I find is I can usually just use app component and app module and put everything in app module and everything in app component. And I'm generally good. I try to create my serverless applications to be fairly small and then or targeted, and then compose them together. I have written much more complex, very large serverless applications where I further break out this class structure. You'll notice this component annotation takes a list of modules. So if you need to structure your Dagger files out into more modules, you can absolutely do that with Dagger. All right, let's get into our core code here. So we're going to process tweets. So at this point, let's just start. So here's some Lombok magic. So usually what you have to do is you have to create a logger, right? You have to create some static logger at the top of your class and everything. This just does it for you. So this makes it so I now have this magical log variable that's a static variable in my class, and I can do my info logs. So let's just let's just do an info log of all the tweets that we get. Let's say, so the compiler stops complaining at me. Great. So let's just start here. and let's see if we can just get this to work. That's another thing I like to do in my development is just incremental, start incremental. Another best practice for me, of course, is using Git. So right now I have a lot of stuff in here, and I haven't made a single commit so far. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to create a commit for my git ignore, my pom, my sam YAML, and I'm just going to call this basic serverless app setup work.
I'm actually loving this because we're even using Git now, and wow, that's evolving quite fast.
Yeah, I'm really trying to show my actual development process. Like, this is what I do. So great. So now let's go ahead and add our source. And we have no tests so far. I think to make Git happy, I'm probably going to have to add some file here. So now in Git.
James, can you do me a favor? Can you actually clear up your terminal just because some of the commands are going to the bottom and I'm not seeing some of those? Yeah,
perfect. Absolutely. No, I appreciate the feedback. Yeah, let me know whatever makes it easier to see what I'm doing. Yeah. So here you can see all my basic Dagger setup and Lambda and everything, and my empty tweet processor is all in a commit. So let's call this logging tweet processor. Okay, and at this point, we have a clean working branch.
Right.
And we've committed all this. So IntelliJ stops complaining at me. All right.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so IntelliJ is complaining because it can't find this Dagger app component, but hopefully Maven should be happy. Let's check it out and see if it is.
Sure. In the meantime, that's actually doing it. One tip I learned from a customer recently is about the git ignore. There's a website called gitignore.io that you essentially say what are the operating systems you're going to be developing, what IDEs you're going to be developing, and what language. And he creates a big git ignore for really, really like lots of stuff in there.
Yeah. All right. First error. Woo. All right.
Simple.
So app component unscoped may not reference scoped bindings. So this is probably where I'm going to cheat and look at my other example to see if I forgot some annotation. Oh, so app component doesn't just have component, it has singleton on it. So let's see if that helps. Okay, I'm going to put this here, and then let's check our module real quick. So that just has module and provides and singleton. So let me see if that was enough to fix it. Oops. Maven not moved. They should create and we built.
I guess drops. Woohoo!
Yay! All right. So that Dagger class now exists. So if we look in Target, I want to see if we can find it. That's classes. Let's look at generated sources. Okay. So here is kind of the magic, right? That's at the bottom. Let me show you again.
Yeah,
so
cool.
Here is, you can see that under target generated sources, there's a new class that was generated by Dagger called Dagger App Component. Now I can look at it and it's big. It's not that big actually. But this is all the Dagger magic to wrap things. But you can see that create method that I was talking about right up here. Mm-hmm. This create method is here. Mm-hmm. And it's a static method, so I wasn't lying. And it returns that interface that I defined. So it is there. And that's Dagger doing its magic. You can see it also for the module itself. It created this factory class. I'm not going to look at it. It's a lot of Dagger magic, and it's pretty amazing, honestly. All the build time logic. It's really cool it's fun to look through, but let's not do that today.
Cool.
All right. So we're building, but I did have to make a fix. So I'm just going to do a commit -a amend. So that means -a means add this to what I'm going to commit. Amend means I'm just going to add it to the last commit that I had. So my logging tweet processor.
What I love about these tweet streams is, especially this particular build on serverless, is I can see every presenter has its own preferences. I know I wouldn't use amend. Other people love it. And then it's just so fun to see how every person do it differently. And we all get there at the end anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. There's different styles, and what works for one person may not work for the other, and that is completely okay. I'm also Git command line user. I'm a big command line user. Other people, like, there are some really amazing UI tools for Git that people prefer using. I'm not going to make fun of anybody for that. Okay, unless it's Chris. No, I'm just kidding.
Actually, not only Chris is still there, but we also have Darth Vader actually making a comment. Maybe we should just use git push minus force. But actually,
I like it.
Let's actually take that as a second stage.
Awesome. So let's actually deploy this. So we have. So I didn't have to write anything involving the Twitter API here because I have an app to take care of that for me. Now, so how do we actually deploy? So I have the AWS CLI installed. I have a profile that I create for Twitch. So I use S3LS just to make sure that that it's working and right account. Okay, great. So that's pointing to my account. S3 doesn't require a region, but I think I set this beforehand, but you can either specify a region parameter on your command line, or another thing you can do is set an environment variable. And now every AWS command is going to assume that. So I will use my profile, and it's US East 1. So now if I called something like CloudFormation, and if you're ever wondering what the commands are that are available, you just type help, and it shows you all the different command. Okay, sorry, I know I'm flipping around pretty fast here, but on this page, there are all the different applications you can do. Mm-hmm. So if I look at CloudFormation, I can type CloudFormation and then just help. And then it tells me all the CloudFormation commands available. Mm-hmm. So let's take a look at describe stacks, for example. Let me find it. Here we go. So now if I do describe stacks, then is this working? Yes. Okay. So I have some stacks available in my account. Let me find CloudFormation.
Yeah, I personally like to set up snippets in my IDE, especially because the CloudFormation package, deploy, and describe, they usually have some nice little tricks with James path. But yeah, like I said, it's a preference thing, which is cool.
Yeah, so what you can see here is that I've deployed from the Serverless Application Repository. This was actually for my last Twitch stream. I have the Twitter event source, and I have my Retweet Leaderboard, which uses Twitter event source. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to repurpose this to use my new app. So let's deploy. So the first step is let's actually deploy this. So CloudFormation, let me recall what my buckets are. I'm just going to use this one. I have one that I used for SAM publishing in US East 1. So I'm just going to copy that bucket down for future reference. So in CloudFormation, there's a command called package, and this is used with SAM. So let me take a look at the help for this because I don't remember what the parameters are. Okay, so you have to point to a template file, and then you have to provide an S3 bucket. So I have my template file. Oh, I have tab completion. Yes. All right. Template file. And that's my sam.yaml. I have S3 buckets. There it is. Yep. And I had copied that down. Oh, I copied the option down. I copied this down earlier. And let's see what happens here. It's probably going to error on me, but let's see.
You should have an output as well. Oh, actually, I think by default we just have a template.
Okay. So something happened where it uploaded some object to my S3 bucket, and then it just spit out a new template. So I think the way you normally use it is you give it an output,
Yeah, I was just actually cheating and looking at my snippet. And I was like, yeah, I think by default we just...
Yeah, so there's an output template file, and then and we'll call this deploy.
I think yeah, you can call it deploy. I usually call mine packaged.yaml, but deploy.
Package?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go with yours. I like it. Sorry, I'm at the bottom of the screen again. Okay, so this time it packaged it up and wrote it, and it even gives me this little tip. It says, okay, AWS CloudFormation deploy template file, and it gives me a really long full path to my package.yaml, and then stack name. So it's going to allow me to create a stack. So now I can deploy it by creating a stack. I did just realize that there's a problem with my template. So I could deploy it if you guys want to see it, but it's just going to fail. So my handler is to do, my handler is to do. That is definitely not valid. So what is the handler? Well, the handler is language dependent, right? But the handler is language dependent. So this is the handler that we want. So the way to reference a Java package is that we actually have to, we put the full name, the full class name to the request handler. Let's see if I can type.
Processor handler.
Yep. So we put the full name of the class, and then we have to do : and then the method to call handle request. So if you look in here, it's called handle request.
Nice.
So that's what I'm typing in my SAM template. Okay, so that tells it this is the code bundle. And then in that code bundle, you're going to look for this class and invoke this method in a Java 8 runtime environment.
I also just noticed in the meantime the policies, actually there's no policies in there. Maybe we just comment that out for now?
Sure. Yeah, we can add that later.
Yeah.
There's also really no environment variables here. I should talk about environment variables and what I do with that. Since we talked about structure a little bit, because I don't think this app's really going to use any. So what I usually do, and this is just my convention, but I create a class called env.
I see what you're doing.
And then, sorry, this is kind of Java best practice, but if it's just going to be static helpers, then you make it so you can instantiate it and it's final. But let's say I have an environment variable that's whatever, my var. So the key is going to be something called my var, and then let's say it's a number, right? So I like to use Java's strong typing to kind of handle that detail for me in the code. So I create this public static, and then let's say it's supposed to be an integer, and then I might have something like my var, and then I'll say return integer parseInt, and then system get env my var key. Okay, so this handles kind of the parsing, and you can put additional validation or some fallback behavior if you want in here, but I'm just keeping this one simple. I usually keep them pretty simple. But this is nice because then from inside my code, my other best practice is that I don't put any of the details of, like, environment variable is a detail of kind of that we're using Lambda, and I don't want that in my regular business logic. So let's say I needed my var in this class. I would just create a constructor argument that takes my var in. Let's say I needed that for some reason. Okay, let's say I needed that for some reason. Here, I'll just do. Okay, I needed this. So it's final, which means that it needs to be passed in the constructor. I could write a constructor. Tweet processor that takes this string my var, and this is all our fun Java boilerplate stuff, right? I could write that, or I could just use Lombok, which has a required args constructor. And boom, it understands final means this is a required argument, so I'm going to create a constructor that takes that argument for you. So this is why I use Lombok. It just really eliminates a lot of that boilerplate for you.
I'm not going to lie. I was looking at the boilerplate and I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And then I just love how the IDE auto-completes most of these pieces already.
Yeah, Lombok's one of those things that as soon as you start using it, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to stop using it. this is awesome.
Cool, I should give this a try.
So, but my point here is that this has no knowledge of this is the whole dependency injection and inversion of control format, that this just takes in this string. It doesn't know where it comes from. And what you can do is now in this module, now this requires a string, right? So now I can just say env.myvar, and that pulls it from the environment. So this keeps it, I've found this to be very clean. Oh, except it's giving me an error because I made this a string and it's supposed to be an int.
It's actually pretty cool because you can end up passing multiple environment variables and still keeping the interface quite clean.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps the code really nice and clean. So I use this, and it also helps make it more readable because this env, your variable name, if you want to keep environment variable conventions, it's like all caps and everything. And rather than having system.getEnv sprinkled throughout your business logic, you just have it all in this dependency injection layer, and then your class just takes really simple parameters with it.
Right.
Okay. Now the last piece of the puzzle is sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, but this variable is supposed to be defined. Now, by default, it'll be null, but that's going to explode when I try to parse it as an integer. So where this links up with your SAM template is in your environment. You can specify this variable and give it some value, right?
Yeah.
So now this will actually come in as a string, because environment variables are all strings. This will come in as a string, but my code is going to parse it as an integer, and that way I get strong typing in my application. So that's how I like to handle environment variables and using them in my app.
Makes sense. I guess for people who are seeing this for the first time, there's definitely multiple places and multiple ways of you using for configuration. I like that approach, and at the same time, there's also a drawback where if you need to make a change in that configuration, you need to trigger a new deployment, a new packaging, a new deployment. But there's definitely other ways as well. So if you've never done this before, if you're on the Twitch stream, there's a really cool service called System Manager Parameter Store that also does some of those heavy lifting for you. And there's also environment variables for Lambda itself. But this is actually what I really liked about this approach is how clean the interface looks like, and you can reuse that somewhere else as well, not only a Lambda handler.
Yeah, cool. It's a nice reusable pattern. And again, like I said, it may seem like a lot at this phase when this is all my business logic is, but I promise you, for any non-trivial application, like it becomes a really nice clean pattern. Anyway, I like it. It works for me and my teams.
Cool. Okay. So just to make sure we are still on time, we have about 45 minutes. So we can definitely get more details. By the way, for those of you who haven't done this yet, we have a Slack channel. Most of us are there already, if not everyone. Please join us. We posted the link on the Twitch in case you need to leave or in case you want to watch that later. Hopefully you're going to stay with us until the end. But if you want to catch up later about all of this stuff and probably more, join us on the Slack channel, please.
Yep.
Please.
I just ran Maven package to rebuild and recreate my Uber jar for this, my Lambda jar, and then I just reran my package command. So now let's actually deploy this.
Cool.
So CloudFormation deploy. It says template file, and it wants me to point to my packaged.yaml file, and then a stack name. Let's call it tweet sentiment. Okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Cool. So in the meantime, I'm just going to actually post out some of those pieces. Oh, your outputs doesn't have any resources, any keys, so you may want to comment that out.
Sure. Love when stuff breaks. Let's see. All right, yeah. So this has nothing under it. Let's comment this out. We will. Now I don't have to rebuild in Maven because
the code is pretty much the same.
Yeah, because the code hasn't changed, just the template has. So I just regenerated the template, and then let's try deploying again. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, if this is the first time for you actually seeing CloudFormation package and CloudFormation deploy, you just need a flag. You need a capability.
Yeah,
let me just double check.
So it's complaining, and I just have to have this capability IAM.
Yeah, because you're probably creating an IAM. Actually, Sam is creating an IAM role for you behind the scenes and adding the permissions you need, like sending the logs to CloudWatch logs and everything.
Yep. So this created successfully. Now let's actually watch it. So here it is, tweet sentiment in CloudFormation. And yeah, as you alluded to, even though it looks like a single resource, there's actually going to be multiple resources created in this template. I won't open up the actual template, but you can see the transform template if you want to look here. So CloudFormation gives you all this, and we'll watch as it's creating an IAM role that's used by Lambda that's assumed by Lambda to invoke it, and it's completed. So now we have a Lambda function that doesn't do a whole lot, but
we have it deployed already. It's actually a good sign. We are progressively getting there.
Yeah, so you can see the actual name of this Lambda function is CloudFormation generates the name. Best practice for generating SAM templates, don't specify the name yourself. If you hard code the name, then if somebody wants to deploy two different stacks with the same app, the names will conflict. So CloudFormation, that's actually a huge thing that they do for you, is that they can generate names that are unique.
And even more recently, if you look at the top, there's actually a blue message in there and saying that we're now automatically detecting that the Lambda function belongs to a CloudFormation stack, and we even highlight that for you. Yeah. So that's actually there's no excuse on that one anymore.
So let's go ahead and test our function. The console makes it pretty easy to test. I don't have a real tweet available, but I did say it just takes an array of strings, right? So let's create, that is definitely not valid JSON. Let's create a list of, sorry, it's jumping around a bunch. There. Sure. I'll just create this, and then, oops. If you want to know, these are my official test strings that I like to use all the time.
I actually love this because I use blah and human all the time. I keep trying to find new words, but it sounds like everyone follows blah everywhere or foobar. Oh no, what happened there?
All right, runtime error occurred during JSON parsing, stack trace, JSON mapping. Let's see. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff here. So under the covers, Lambda is using Jackson to deserialize. So let's see, instance of string out of this object. Okay, so it doesn't like that it's a string. So how about we make this a, so what it's, oops, sorry, that's my other app. So what it's not liking is that I'm trying to create a string and it sees a JSON object, and so it gets angry. Now, this is a place where Java gets a little painful working with JSON. So one thing I can do is say, all right, I know these are all going to be strings, so I can create this kind of generic-ish thing. I'll just say it's a map of objects. All right, so here are my tweets. Now it's complaining, but the nice thing with IntelliJ is it can just fix the problem. So just change this output to take a map of tweets, and now let's see if this works. All right.
Cool. I don't know if you have installed, but it would be cool possibly for the next episode to actually use SAM local, so we could actually sort that particular feedback loop, so we can see how that
Absolutely. Would work. I thought about that this morning, and it was like 30 minutes beforehand, so I definitely didn't have a chance to do it. Let's see. Method not override or implement method from the super type. So it's not happy with my handler, and that's because in my handler I say that it takes a list of strings when it actually takes a list of I changed it. So
that should be the same. Yeah.
All right. I should have listened to IntelliJ anyway. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a clean and a package just to make sure we're good. Yay. Let's CloudFormation package this again. So I'm just searching back in my history to do the same command. And then let's do CloudFormation deploy. And it automatically, since I have the same stack name, it's just updating that stack with,
right.
So the stack already exists, and it's going to update our configuration here. Okay, and this will automatically wait for it to complete. Oh, it completed already.
Sounds like it's done already. Yeah.
Yep. So I didn't really have to refresh this page, but
I'd say is the force of a habit.
Yeah.
Here we go. Worked. Woohoo!
All right. So this is return value. Okay, but I actually wanted the log. I wanted to know what was logged. So what I can do in the Lambda console, it actually has this really nice monitoring tab. I use it all the time. We can see the number of invocations that have happened. You can actually jump to CloudWatch metrics if you want to do more with these metrics. You can see how long that they took in milliseconds. Right now that's a little high because of that cold start time, right? I just updated. You'll see if I run it again, super fast.
Yeah.
Right? So you can see that difference. I had that error from the first time I ran. I had one error, but now I haven't had any since. And I can jump to the logs. So this takes me to CloudWatch logs, and I'm able to see here was my first error. And then now, let's see if I'm not seeing my stuff. So I'm not seeing my logs. So I'm using log4j2, and I don't have any log4j2 config that's set up. So that's something I need to add. This one I'm totally going to steal from my leaderboard app. So under resources, I have this log4j2, and I will show you what it looks like. But basically, it adds, that's not very clear. Okay, so basically it adds this, there's a Lambda appender. That's something that I got from, and again, this is all documented in AWS documentation. I'm going to put the date at the beginning, AWS request ID, and then my log, some extra information. And our log level is set to info for this. Okay, so great. Let's try it again.
We just run a package.
Yep. Well, I'll need to rebuild. Yeah. So Maven package so that my jar is updated because this resource is actually put into the jar. And then I'll do my CloudFormation package.
In the meantime, we're doing this. There was a comment very early in the very Twitch this episode where a person called David, who hopefully is going to be joining us now on Slack to continue that conversation, was actually mentioning about all this bootstrapping Maven package, CLI package, CLI deploy in a way that becomes quite seamless, like using a makefile. I use a makefile almost all the time. Other people ended up using shell scripts, and all of these pieces can be automated as well. We're actually showing you using the CLI commands for now to actually make that easier. You can see that at the bottom. There's if you scroll that down again, I could see that there's a tweet processor, my var. I'm just waiting for the stream to actually update, but I'm quite sure I can see that now.
Okay, let me refresh this. Okay, so you can see the log with my var 42, and then the log with this is my array. So great. Right. All right, we have a tweet. We have this processor. All right, so now that we have kind of this end-to-end experience, I'm just going to minimize this because I keep accidentally going to this one. Okay, so now we have it deployed and functioning. It's just not doing what we set out to do. So now we need to actually do something with our process. So I'm going to remove this myvar thing because I don't actually need it, but I need to replace it with, I need to make a call to comprehend. So I'll start going a little bit faster just because I feel like we've established kind of the general workflow here. So now for our regular dependencies, I'm going to add a new dependency. I don't remember the actual Maven. Let's go to Maven. Sorry, make that bigger. I'm going to search for AWS SDK, and I see AWS SDK Java. All right. Here we go. And then I'm going to search for comprehend, and there it is. So this is my group ID. And then I don't know if it'll find it automatically for me. Let's look for comprehend. I see preview in the name, so I'm hoping I don't have to be whitelisted to preview this. That would, but then the console shouldn't have worked, so that's why I think I'm okay. And then latest version. Let me see all. Yeah, I guess I'll just go with this. All right. And hopefully I can find it. Just trying to resolve the dependency right now. You can do it. You do it, IntelliJ.
It should.
Let me see.
Here we go. Works.
Oh, yay. All right. And then let's find CloudWatch. So I definitely need CloudWatch metrics. Oh, this is the preview of 2.0. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I need to go to...
the preview for the SDK.
Yeah, This is the developer preview for the SDK 2.0. And I don't know, do we want to do that or do we want to... I think we should not take that risk.
No, let's not take chances for this episode because we only have 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So we can leave that for another episode or a follow-up of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The SDK v2 is in preview right now, and there's some very exciting stuff with it. Again, I'm going to go cheat and go to my other app and find, okay, here's what the regular AWS SDK one looks like.
In the meantime, you do this. Let me just actually message everyone on the Twitch chat. I sent you a link to the new version of the Java SDK. That actually includes a lot of interesting things. And one of them that I'm more excited for me, at least from a performance perspective, is that you can swap actually the HTTP client implementation. So that should help a lot from the bootstrapping perspective. Instead of using Apache HTTP client, you can use something that's more lightweight. So for Lambda, that's actually a big boost.
Yes, and it really makes a big difference. And actually, cold start times, it makes a big difference for Java. It's very, very exciting. Okay, so what did I need? I need comprehend. All right, there we go. That looks more standard. I thought that was a little different.
That looks stable now, which actually makes my heartbeat actually goes lower now.
Yeah, I saw preview and I was like, uh-oh, this is a bad idea. All right, 324. And you should totally try the preview too. It is very... I'm not saying anything against the preview. I just didn't want to take that risk for this one.
Just not for today, but we could actually definitely try that.
Yeah. CloudWatch metrics. That sounds like what we need. And
the version 111.
Let's see.
That's
it's probably the same. I see SDK CloudWatch. So actually that CloudWatch metrics, I think... We'll try it. Actually, I'm just going to say CloudWatch, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Because that's not even popping up. Let me see if I say... Oh, it is there. All right, I should probably use that because that's actually what I want to do.
In the meantime, you do your magic. I'm just going to reply to some of the comments in here.
Yeah.
So David, the reason that you actually initialize in a faster way, just because of the HTTP client, you no longer have to do all of this heavy lifting for a HTTP connection pool, etc. While you still have it, there's a bunch of other stuff that Apache actually does behind the scenes that's actually quite CPU intensive. So if you actually cut that short and use something more lightweight, when you try that at the version 2, even for the first request of doing something really silly like a hello world or hello universe, you're going to see how much of that difference it actually makes. If you make a call to, let's say, a fake JSON API, which is something I normally use when I'm doing prototyping, if you just make a simple API call for that one using the HTTP client, you will see how much of a difference that makes.
Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken, now my tweet processor needs Comprehend and it needs CloudWatch, right?
Nice.
So I can go over to my module, so now that's failing. So I'm going to delete, I really don't think I'm going to need environment variables, so I'm just going to get rid of this. And then, so now we actually need those objects, right? So I need something, Amazon, sorry, I'll make this. I need an Amazon CloudWatch. I need a Comprehend. Okay, so I need those. So where will I get them? Well, in Dagger, you can just create these methods that return it. Mm-hmm. So I could either, well, actually the simpler way to do it is I can actually just create them right in here. So the standard way in Java to do this is to get a client builder and standard. So
you're actually using the opposite, right? You're using Comprehend for Amazon CloudWatch?
Yeah.
Just in case.
They both start with C. I don't know what to tell you.
That's fine. That's actually called live coding. It looks really simple when you're doing it, but when you're doing live, every second it looks like, oh my god, I just black out or whatever.
Yeah. Comes on CloudWatch. Okay, so what you'll notice here is normally you have to worry about providing credentials and providing a region and all these different values. The reason why I don't have to provide those here is because in the Lambda environment, the SDK will actually just figure it all out. So region will get set to the same region that your Lambda is executing in. If you don't want that, then you manually set it.
Yeah.
If you want to call it in a different region. And then the credentials, it's actually the role that the Lambda is assumed. It'll just use the same role. So whatever permissions you give that role, and that's what we're going to run into here, that's what you'll have. Your Lambda will have those permissions, and these clients will be calling with those credentials. So now I have my tweet processors armed and ready. If I were doing this, I'd probably create these, and I'd probably maybe create some proxy object over these, but I'm actually just not even going to do that for this. Okay, so I've added all this, but what does my tweet actually look like? So I want to take the text of the tweet, right? So before I deploy, I have a working Lambda function, right? I have a working Lambda function that logs whatever is given it. So I'm going to wire it to the actual Twitch, or sorry, not Twitch, the actual tweet event source. Mm-hmm. So let's take, so this is the Twitter event source, has this, let me see, here's the Twitter search poller. And what you'll see is it has some environment variables, and oh my god, don't look at my credentials. No, I'm just kidding, they're encrypted. So one of the reasons why I didn't
my heartbeat just went to the roof. I'm like, no.
So one of the reasons why I have this pre-deployed is because I didn't want to encrypt my Twitter API credentials live on Twitch. So these are already encrypted. The app supports decrypting them via KMS. There are alternative options, and you should definitely discuss that. But the key here is that there is a tweet processor function name, and I can change that. So I'm going to change it to be my sentiment metrics function. Before I save it, I'm going to make sure I want my...
we could also, just before you go, we could also change the hashtag, and we can use another hashtag, like build on servers or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually, the Twitch audience, you should come up with hashtags you want me to search. Maybe it'll go terribly, but let's figure it out. It'd be like Tweety McTweetface or something. But So right now I have this CloudWatch event rule disabled, and what that means is that my Lambda is not getting invoked over and over. Because this is kind of a personal account, and I didn't want and so I don't want to just keep invoking my Lambda function if I'm not using it. So yeah, I switched the tweet processor, and I'm going to save that configuration, but nothing's going to happen because, as you can see, it's not being invoked. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that now. Sorry, you wanted me to change the search.
To the hashtag? Maybe?
Yeah, so right now, let me try just serverless. And then there are additional parameters that the Twitter search actually can recognize. And this -filter native retweets, what that means is that, so in Twitter's data model, if you retweet a tweet, your retweet, even though it doesn't look like it, it's considered its own tweet. So this is saying, don't return all of those individual tweets. It's really like the original is what I want. Exactly. So that's just additional flags. And those are all things that you can test out here. So
I got some ideas. So from the chat, there's one, which I like. It's called YOLO.
All right. Let's see. So if I just wanted to test this, so that -filter, all that is actually Twitter. So
nice.
that filters these out, so you can test out these things. Another one that I deleted that I had on there's like min retweets, there's equals some number. There's actually a lot of cool flags that there is.
So let's actually use Lambda as a hashtag for now, just because, or even build on servers, and I can make some tweets from my account as well.
Yeah, I totally should have had you do the try that first. Let me see if Lambda. Okay, so we have tweets on Lambda, or do you want AWS Lambda?
Yeah, let's actually go for that, so we can.
Great.
Then we can make some tests.
So I'm going to put that in. Yeah. Note to self: you're gonna test out the searches before I throw them in. All right. So AWS Lambda filtering out native retweets, and then I'll save this function. I will enable.
Okay, so let me get my Twitter ready.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them logged in.
Yeah. So hopefully, what we should see. So I'm going to just. So again, it's every minute. So we're going to wait to see an invocation come in. And once we see that invocation, we should then see, oh, I did want to kind of set a bigger batch size, but we'll save that for later.
Okay, so I just made a tweet. Let's see. I was trying to remember if you can also force a call from CloudWatch. Okay. You can also test.
So here we go. So we got our first invocation. Let's hope that it erred.
Oh no!
All right, let's see what happened. Oh, I know what happened. Actually, so when you create this function, it didn't have.
It doesn't have permissions.
Yeah. So normally when you deploy it, so normally you wouldn't go and hack the name the way that I did. So let me find the role.
Yeah, so normally, so for those of you watching this stream, normally we would go to the same template and add additional policies and permissions. Because we're short on time, we have 20 minutes before we finish, we just kind of make that little change. Let's put it this way.
Yep. So let me see what I have here. Yeah, so this is the invoke function, and you can see that it's not the new function.
Yeah.
So
you will have to click on edit policy, and you can change on the JSON.
Yep. So I'm going to put my new tweet processor in here, tweet sentiment metrics, and all right. Okay, so now let's
And
see
just before we go, the Lambda function we're calling for the tweet processor, do we have permissions to call CloudWatch and Comprehend as well? I'm just actually...
we don't yet. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't even upload those changes that I'd made
Perfect.
because I just have the function that logs. And so what I want to do is actually just log some tweets so I can
Just
see
if you
what
can
the
get it.
structure of the API is.
Got you.
So
we're getting an error
waiting.
over there.
Waiting on the, okay, here's another invoke. Let's see if it, all right, got a couple invokes. Still getting
It's
there.
actually erroring out, yeah. So
All right, let's check it out. Live coding for the win.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what's happening here. So, still some authorization errors. So, Twitter search pollers not authorized to invoke function. And let me just make sure that I got this.
Is that the same region, right? I'm just actually conscious about region as well.
Yeah,
because I
it
usually
should be.
I make those silly things.
Yeah, it should be. Let me expand this. It could just, this doesn't seem like it's matching. Let me see. All right, so I'm going to, looks the same. It could just be delay. It could just be a little bit of delay. So
what about, I was thinking, what about having the entire name instead of a wildcard? But I think wildcard are fine.
And the reason the wildcard is there is so that any version, if you want to invoke a different version or an alias that you have on top of it, that's really what that's there for. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and direct invoke this.
Yeah, so if you click on the test, you should be able to have a CloudWatch. If you click on the event template, there's a CloudWatch schedule. There should be a scheduled event. Here we go.
Okay.
So something similar.
Test scheduled event. Let's create.
So that we can mimic CloudWatch events. Okay, looks like it's working now.
The function succeeded. Great. So now we can see, maybe the metrics don't reflect it yet, but that one succeeded. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so now we see 11 invokes. It's still 11 failures. Let's check our. In worst case, we can just manually invoke it here, but let's check our other function.
And see if that was ever called, right?
Yeah, and where's my sentiment metrics? All right, here's my sentiment metrics, and I can see that it's been invoked a number of times during this.
Yeah.
But it actually has some errors, which is interesting. Yeah, this is our live coding. All right, let's see. So
I can see the tweets in there, at least though.
Yeah, is this Lambda? Okay, so here's AWS Lambda. So I do see that.
You're getting a Jackson, but I don't know if that's just a warning or isn't. Yeah, it looks like an exception.
Okay.
Well, at least this function is being called, we are searching, and we are actually sending those tweets to the function for processing.
Right.
Got halfway through.
Okay. All right. So if we can't instantiate that value, so it's really a serialization thing. So I think I'm going to go cheat and look at my other one and see what I did there. Because I definitely have handlers that can process this. Here's my tweet processor. I actually take a list of strings there, and then my handler actually does take a list of strings. So I'm going to change my tweet processor to just take a list of strings. I remember that was blowing up before, but maybe there's something different about the structure of it. And then my processor accepts the list of strings, And then what does it do? So it actually filters those. It creates this new tweet object. So cool. I'm just going to copy this over to my processor.
Yeah. By the way, for those of you actually who are watching on this on this stream, don't worry. All the code that we actually use on those build on serverless or those Twitch streams, we actually share those source code afterwards as well. Sometimes may not be readily available on AWS Labs or AWS Samples, but we surely actually share those code after that anyway.
Okay. So here's some JSON dependencies that I need, along with JSON. Just going to grab those over. Told you I had a safety net. Okay. All right. So this is actually let's get ID, get quote, get retweet count. So I'm going to look at my object here and find the actual text. Metadata. So I'm just going to add a text. I'm going to follow this format.
Text.
Okay. So now I can get text out of here. I'm going to have my Lambda handler take. I'm going to change it back to taking a list of string. I thought that's what I had taken before.
Yeah, I actually remember that we changed the object. We didn't get back to string, but that's fine.
Okay, so I have my tweets. I'm going to go ahead and log. Again, just going to grab this because, you know, if you've done it before, that's a good thing. Okay, so I'm processing my tweets as JSON, and it tells you how many you're processing, and now at this point I will have a process tweets as JSONs. I'm going to stream that to create a new tweet object. This parses it, and then I need to create actually, I'll just do this and say for each process tweet, and I'll create that method. It's a consumer of a tweet, and oh, sorry, tweet. Okay, so now I should be in a place where I can just grab the text. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to call comprehends batch. So actually I want to convert this to text. So map, and I'm going to do tweet get text, and then I'm actually just going to basically convert this to, so I'm going to pull the text out of the tweet, right? So now I have the tweet text list, and then I'm going to convert that to a batch of, so now I'm going to say comprehend dot batch detect sentiment, and I'll create a new request. Sorry, I don't know why I have this screen like split. And we're going to say with text list. And so I've never used this API. So let's just see, language code is, should we assume it's all in English? I think we can just And maybe Aitor, maybe you can help me out here. If you pull up the comprehend documentation, I was wondering if maybe you can tell me, I'm guessing that parameter is optional and it will auto-detect if I don't fill it in, the language. So this is the batch detect sentiment, but I'm going to put my tweet text list in here, get a response out.
I'm just looking at the docs right now, so let's see, what is it?
So I'll get a result list that gives me something. I don't know what this is. I'm guessing it's a list. So this returns me a list of detect sentiment item results. Okay.
You actually have to pass the language as EN for English, so that's not optional. You have to pass that.
All right, well, we're just going to assume it's English, which is not a great assumption to make, but we're just going to do the best we can. I think there's a separate API for detecting language. And so we could, at first, we could...
detect the language, Makes sense.
So let me see if there's batch detect dominant language. So there is an API for detecting the dominant language. But for now, let's assume it's English, and then we'll add... which I understand is insensitive, but culturally insensitive. But for the process of iterative development, let's do that. So we'll get the result list from here, and now those objects, so I'm just doing this to see what's in here. So there's an index, there's a sentiment, and there's a sentiment score. All we really care about is the sentiment score. Let me see what that is. So I'm going to pull up I'm going to pull up the API reference.
Not that one. No. Yeah, that one.
Yep. Okay, so now we're going to detect sentiment, and we're going to look at the response. So sentiment score, okay, so this is exactly what we saw in the UI. So we saw mixed, negative, neutral, and positive. So hopefully this has some, okay, so it has float values for each one of these.
Even better, there's even a method for that. Cool.
Yep. Cool. So what we want to do is we want to convert this to a request, CloudWatch metrics request. So let's see what CloudWatch is. So I'm going to comment this out for now. And I think we're all doing this one in one big method, which is a best practice. Just kidding. So we want to put metric data, right? And that's going to take a put metric data request, and that'll have a collection of metrics data. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm going to grab our result list, and let me, I'll just do this all in one thing, but I'm basically going to map it to metric data, and probably flat map it. Well, let's just try this first. I think we're going to end up with a collection of collections, but so what we want is, what does this one want? This parameter wants a collection of metric data. Let's just be specific about this. So here's a sentiment item result. We love long names in Java, so we're going to collect this to a list. Okay, so there's our request. So what that's doing is it's putting metric data into CloudWatch, and it's taking the result of the sentiment score analysis, and it's turning it into a list of metrics to return. Okay, let's see. So now I have to convert this sentiment item result into metrics. So let's see what this takes. With dimensions. So we're going to call this, I guess we can just do these as separate metrics. I was thinking dimensions. So what we can do is,
We could actually keep it simple, just a simple like Twitter as a dimension and then a metric name, sentiment or something.
Let's say, we'll just say the positive score. All right.
Cool.
So we won't do dimensions right now. We'll do statistic values, timestamp. Timestamp we'll just use, or actually, well, if we wanted to be really good about it, we could do, okay, so if we wanted to, we could use the tweet timestamp, which might be a little bit better, but let's not. Let's just say this is as of now. So we have a metric name, we have a timestamp, we are not going to use dimensions, we are going to use a statistic set, and we're just going to say the sum is this. Sorry, can't handle the giant name. Sentiment result dot get sentiment score dot get positive. So this will be our positive. Let's see if we can make that into a double. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So we have converted a item result. Now this sentiment result contains multiple. It's like positive scored, neutral, negative, right? I'm just pulling out positive because otherwise I'll end up with a list of lists, and there is a way to flatten them, but off the top of my head, I'm not remembering. So let's start here, and then we can always enhance and make it better. So what this is doing is it's receiving a batch of tweets. It's sending that batch to comprehend to detect the sentiment as English. It's assuming English, and then it's taking that result and it's converting it into the positive statistic into a metric to CloudWatch, and then it's sending it to CloudWatch. Okay. The other thing that you have alluded to many times is that we need permissions, and so we need permissions to call comprehend. And one way is to kind of manually create policies, but the serverless application. Let's see. So the SAM GitHub SAM provides a really cool feature called policy templates. Policy templates give you, there we go. So it gives you this named policy that you can just use, and it'll expand it. SAM will expand it into this. So you can see that there's a comprehend basic access policy, and it gives you the ability to, and hopefully batch detect sentiment is one of them. So we can go to our SAM template, and we can add this policy. I'm going to cheat and double check my other template just to make sure I'm doing this right. Yes, okay, so it takes a list. Now, you may say that sounds like AWS managed policies, and for this particular policy, it's very similar. But where it becomes, so AWS managed policies are very helpful, but for example, there's a DynamoDB read-only, and the resource on it is set to star. That means that that Lambda function has permission to read any Dynamo table in your account, right? And so these give tighter restrictions. You can see here's a Dynamo policy for backup, to restore from backup. And you can see that the resource is constrained. So this policy template has a parameter called table name. And you can give it, you can fill in the parameter, and you can see it constrains the resource down to only that table in this account in this region. So it
Right.
constrains it down for you. So it's actually a pretty nice security feature of SAM to allow you to better scope your research.
So sorry for cutting you short, just because we're on time. If you're interested in more details about the policies, I sent you a link exactly where in the docs we go through this. And there's a bunch of other policies in there that are quite helpful and explains the parameters, how to use it, and how to use that in the SAM template as well. And if you watched for the previous episode as well about SAM, we open source the entire thing. So you can even start helping us and contribute to the project if you wanted to. And if you're still learning about the project itself, also follow along. There's actually other episodes about just the SAM open sourcing with Sanaf, the one of the men behind actually the SAM.
All right, let's see if we can get to a point. So I'm building it now. It built successfully. I'm going to repackage it and deploy it. And like I said, there may be some permissions issue still. I don't know if there's still a permissions issue on, let's check how we're doing. Sorry, I know I'm flipping through this pretty quickly. Let me check how we're doing on our poller. So
Sure.
here's our search
And actually,
poller.
advantage and send another tweet just in case.
So it looks like that issue got fixed. So I can see 30 invokes of this poller, and then I can see only 11 errors. So it looks like the IAM change kicked in, and now we're successfully getting our tweet processor called. And if I look at our actual tweet sentiment thing, you can see it's been called many, many times. It's just being called, the Twitter search poller batches them in batches of 15, and then async invokes the Lambda. I'm still getting these errors, but I just deployed, so we just deployed our new,
He actually failed on deployment. I think it was something with the SAM template or something like that.
Let's see.
So if you go to the CloudFormation console, we should be able to see why it failed. We could definitely use the CLI, but just because it's quicker, we are a little bit past the time. But let's crack this on.
All right.
So there was a rollback.
Yep. Let's find our events on comprehend.
Yeah, so the comprehend basic access policy is not valid.
Oh, okay. Huh. Well, it is using SAM. So, yeah, worst case, I can just use a custom policy. But I was hoping to use that feature. Okay. So, but let me go ahead and do that.
I was looking for that quick access policy for you right now in the meantime.
Yeah, so do you have a...
I have an additional policy as an example. Let me see where I can send it over to you. If you go to you can go to SAM, but there's also a cookie cutter that I created to speed those stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to GitHub AWS samples.
Mm-hmm.
GitHub AWS samples cookie cutter. I'm gonna post it. So cookie cutter AWS SAM Python.
No, is it cookie dash cutter?
Your AWS L. There's a typo in there. AWS L. Yeah, here you go.
All right.
So if you open up the template cookie cutter project slug, there's a folder in there. Yeah. Open up template.yaml. At the bottom, there's a policy that I added in case you need for it, so to keep it clean. You see the first function, additional permission?
Yep.
So copy that, and we can change the role to match the function. I can help you with that.
Okay, I should be able to just pass statements in there, but I think we're out of time on it. I'm concerned if I switch it to just this permission, because where does this get referenced?
So if you actually, so basically what we're going to do, we will have to say comprehend and then wildcard for star for all the actions and resource star just for now.
Let's see.
Unless you have one already, so we're happy to.
There should be some examples in here. Hoping anyway. This one, I think this does a lot of it for you.
I do have one in my encryption proxy, but again, that's going to use an IAM roller and everything.
Right. That's policy templates. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, I see. You want to pass an inline policy. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So. Okay. Doesn't like that apparently. I hope it likes the put metric policy, but guess what? I'll just
just want to use the CloudWatch. Just because we're out of time, I was thinking of just duplicate that and just use CloudWatch star.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And comprehend star just for the sake of it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, oops, yep, star, and so it does for CloudWatch. That's what we need. Yep. So we get it working.
Okay. All right. Let's try that.
Fingers crossed, everyone.
I know. I don't think I really out there, but that's okay.
So we're packaging that up. Build succeeds. Package with that, and let's deploy it. All right, fingers crossed. Let's go to the console and see if that worked.
Yeah.
Because the polling may take about 2 or 3 seconds. Updating progress. I'm here with all my prayers. Here we go, worked.
Okay,
awesome.
So that deployed. All right, so I'm just going to manually invoke this test method a couple times.
Okay, looks like it's working.
Okay, it's a little difficult to tell now. Okay, so let's jump to the logs. Let's see if...
Let's cut that down.
And the latest one.
I can see Jackson complaining about something, but I can see the tweet.
Yeah, well, that's still the old failures that we were just having. I can try. I think there's just
a lot
of these. So, in UTC right now. Switch to today.
Just put 7 p.m. or something, or actually, yeah, 10 a.m. your time. My bad.
Yeah,
just looking at my time.
Sorry. Oops. Something like that. If you can find something here. Another way that we can tell if it's working is just to look at the metrics.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I could see some of the logs. At least is looking for that one.
So let's.
You actually have a name. You actually have a name of that. Is that called positive?
You know what? I don't actually have a namespace on my. So it's probably going to fail because I need a namespace when I'm calling this. So I gave it the metric data. But I probably have to give it a namespace. Let's see if there's anything else I have to do. So that's credentials. Yeah, I think I have to give it a namespace. So it's probably a validation error happening. Okay.
Okay. Cool. Okay, let's see.
Oh, the joys of coding. There's this great meme that I retweeted a couple days ago that just, I loved it because it said, so the two states of every programmer, and one of them was, I am a god, and the other one was, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's like there really isn't much in between. It's like, why won't this work? And then
I think I was falling from different angles. I was a sysadmin and then became a developer at blah blah blah, etc. And I used to at the beginning was like, why this isn't working? Why this is working? You shouldn't be working in the first place.
Actually, that was another one. It was my code works and my code doesn't work and I don't understand why. And then there was another one that was my code works and I don't understand why.
If you do a hard refresh in there because the console may be caching, try searching for the metric name. I think it was positive score or something, or maybe just positive. Because it's a custom metric, that will open up on the left-hand side, but it's not there yet. I think it's just delaying a bit.
Will show there may be some other error that's going on in the Lambda. So what do you think? We're way over time. Should we just call it?
Yeah, because we are over time right now, I think what we could do, it's up to you and up to the audience on the stream. We could actually have a follow-up on that one. And we could continue on another episode still this month. We just find a quick day that worked for all of us, and then we just crack on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep going on this. I am planning to publish this as an app to the Serverless Application Repository as soon as we find whatever bug is causing this. Maybe it's still some tweet serialization issue. I just very rapidly copied something over from my other app, so there could be a bug there. But yeah, I'm happy to either follow up on this or I'll just fix it and then publish it and people can look at it there. But yeah.
Yeah, so I was actually looking at some people who were actually at the beginning. And what we could do is let's actually have as a follow-up discussion. I believe we should have a second episode on this. We can still do that this month if agenda permits. It's primarily to show, I think it's nice for people to see how the troubleshooting works. And because this is actually a live coding as well, all of this can happen in the same place anyway. We could also use some local to do some of those tests in the next episode. Let's say, I think the audience actually deserves a follow-up, and let's actually do this as a follow-up, and then we can fix it. We can fix it live, and we can show what went wrong, and then everyone learns.
All right, I'll commit this as live stream number 1 fail.
Yeah, let's not that be that hard. Everyone knows that live coding is actually a tough one.
To do, fix bugs. All right, until next time.
Perfect. Okay, no problem. So everyone, thanks for watching the Build on Serverless. This was episode number 3. We will do a follow-up on this one to fix what we just encountered. We don't know yet what it is, but we'll fix it as usual. And then we will get you a link to where the next session is going to be. Please join us on Slack channel. We're always discussing these pieces. Perhaps even if we already fixed this, in the meantime, the session already haven't happened yet, we can post a link to the application anyway. And then we can also post a link to where the episode is going to happen. But for now, thanks for watching. Apologies if not everything went perfectly well, but at least I hope you learned some of the tricky lessons learned on troubleshooting, and especially having James doing the troubleshooting live. For me, that was actually awesome to see how he would think it.
And it's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't mind. I mean, this is real development, right? This is how development works. Things do not go smoothly. You have bugs, you have issues, you have to fix it, and you're generally under a tight timeline, right? So I think we caught all those elements.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't like if the episode went perfectly well, and that's why the series is called Build on Servers. We're gonna build something live. We don't know if it's gonna fail or not. Even if we probably have built that before, building it live with the pressure and everyone asking questions, it's definitely a whole different game.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, James. I really appreciate that, and let's do the follow-up episode.
Yeah, happy to. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.